Spongebob. I've got a bone to pick with you. It's time to check out the last tiny shred of creativity, not yet destroyed by the corporate pinheads running Nickelodeon. Spongebob. As much as I enjoy this cheery sponge's underwater fast food routines, over the years he has managed some bad episodes, worthy of song. So, in order to honor the dim-witted, Nimrod moves Nickelodeon's been making to stifle all creativity left on their network, let's check out the top 6 worst SpongeBob episodes. And as always, if you do like these episodes, that's great. It's just my usual silly personal opinion, and I'm glad you can enjoy these episodes. So take this list with a pinch of salt. Anyway, let's do this countdown. Number 6, the Splinter. SpongeBob, surprise surprise, gets a splinter. In fact, he gets the ultimate mother of all splinters. A huge, pus-filled, blood-spewing, vein-filled splinter. And lucky us, we get to see every tiny detail as it's slowly inserted into the skin. And the rest of the episode is pretty much watching the splinter get more and more revolting. And finally, watching Patrick slowly nail the splinter further into SpongeBob's thumb, covering it in garbage to infect it, and finally leaving it looking like a gangrenous, festering horror. Ugh. For starters, this doesn't actually make sense. Given SpongeBob's anatomic structure, how does he even get a blood-spewing splinter anyway? I mean, he's called Spongebob, but you really do have to give the creators credit for making an injury look so painful, and yet managing to sneak this much horrifying imagery past the censors. The splinter has a lousy premise, not much happens, and it is downright agonizing to watch. And for number 5, SpongeBob, you're fired.
Hey Gary, I'm home. Forever.
Or you could get another job, maybe? I mean, Mr. Krabs openly admits he only pays you a nickel a day. Why don't you be a jellyfish park ranger or something? You love jellyfish. SpongeBob becomes miserably depressed because he's fired from his fry cook job. In fact, from losing his fry cook job, he loses all faith in himself and all energy to live. First off, I want to say this is a downright bad example for kids. You don't have to define yourself by your job. You should define yourself by how you treat others or the hobbies you enjoy. I think people dislike this episode so much because it is a complete change of character for the Sponge we knew. The real SpongeBob we know wouldn't be this crushed and useless after a small setback. But this SpongeBob just becomes empty and cynical. The words empty, cynical, and SpongeBob just don't go in the same sentence. It's unusually discriminating against the unemployed, really.
What are you doing with these here freeloaders?
I got fired. Now I'm unemployed.
Maybe the creators were trying to discourage young people from leaving their jobs. I don't know. But I was not a fan of this episode. And the 4th worst SpongeBob episode is Pet Sitter Pat. I'd say this is the episode where we watch Patrick transition from a lovable stooge to a cruel, apathetic jerk. When SpongeBob leaves the house for the week, we watch Patrick starve Gary to death while torturing him at the same time. And much of the episode is Gary crying in terror and suffering as Patrick laughs inanely. Eventually, because of Patrick's stupidity, Gary turns into a vicious feral monster. That's it, Gary. Attack Patrick! Even I want to see Patrick torn to shreds at this point. This episode really drove home for me why Patrick is one of the most hated cartoon characters. He's not just stupid, but uncaring towards others' feelings. He doesn't even try to do right by SpongeBob and treat his pet well. As the episode drags on, Gary is forced into hiding in order to survive Patrick's rampant stupidity. Until eventually, Patrick tries to set Gary on fire with a flamethrower. How did we even get fire in the sea anyway? It's the ocean. You can't get fire and water and ugh. And we finish this episode off with Patrick trying to kill Gary with salt. Sure, why not? This is not Patrick's best moment. And the 3rd worst SpongeBob episode is Demolition Doofus. I've always felt bad for Mrs. Puff. But I do get the joke, SpongeBob can be a nuisance. But this episode felt more like watching her be repeatedly tormented to the brink of insanity. It feels like I'm watching this hidden, malicious, evil side of the writers whenever I see Mrs. Puff. I just never found it that funny or entertaining to continually watch Mrs. Puff suffer. We start the episode off by SpongeBob permanently injuring her, leaving her hospitalized. At this point, she finally snaps, and we watch her slowly seethe with hate, until she eventually decides she needs to kill SpongeBob.
I could finally be rid of SpongeBob.
Wait, what? Surely on a kid's network, trying to kill SpongeBob is crossing the line just a little? I mean, even Squidward wouldn't try to kill SpongeBob, and he is forced to work with him every single day. To me anyway, seeing someone go insane over their hatred for a person is not really a comfortable experience, and I never quite got the joke of continually beating Mrs. Puffs down until she's miserable. By the end, I really do wish SpongeBob would graduate and Mrs. Puffs would be given peace. And the second worst SpongeBob episode is Stuck in the Ringer. Have I got a stinker for you today? Patrick, surprise, surprise, torments SpongeBob, gluing his friend permanently into the ringer device so he can't eat, work, or even move his hands. I don't even get it. How could stupidity even guide someone to glue someone into place? That seems more like something that would actually take intelligence and malice. This process leaves SpongeBob injured, miserable, and dead inside. This episode is beyond excruciating, and for once, SpongeBob finally complains to Patrick about his passive-aggressive, nasty behavior.
You know how I feel about you ruining my life!
And he damn well should stand up for himself. And in response, the entire park turns on him for complaining about being abused, claiming he has a bad heart. What kind of twisted, mean-spirited, botched-up moral is that? And just to top off the distasteful pile, we are finally subject to imagery of SpongeBob having become paralyzed and insane after the endless abuse and trauma he suffered. Sometimes there's a lazy, boring episode of SpongeBob, and with 10 seasons, who can blame the occasional stinker? But this is just outright cruel.
I guess crying does solve your problems after all.
Sure, why not? And before we get to number one, I'd like to give the usual quick, dishonorable mentions. A pal for Gary. I was tempted to cover this one again, but I talked about it in worst episode of Good Cartoons and didn't have much to add. For those who don't know, SpongeBob gets a pet that tries to eat Gary for the whole episode. It's pretty horrible. Squid Bob Tentacle Pants. Just grotesque. Ugh. Truth or square? Endless flashbacks. And as much as I think Tom Kenny is awesome, watching 60 straight minutes of him calling random celebrities was kinda dull. And I can only imagine how bored the kids must have gotten seeing all these random grown-ups they didn't know. Though that being said, I did really like the Scurvy song by Pink. Anyway, here we go. And the number one worst SpongeBob episode is One Course Meal. I know I've discussed this one before, but there really is just no topping the cruelty of this episode. Who came up with the idea of watching Plankton tortured to the point of insanity and suicide and said,
Yeah, that's a great idea for a kid's cartoon.
Our friend Plankton turns out to be instinctively petrified in fear by the sight of whales. So the creators dedicated the entire episode to torturing Plankton in fear, to the point where he is isolated, broken down, and attempts to kill himself. To which Krabs laughs with glee. Jeebus. I just can't get past the unfiltered malice in this episode. Watching Plankton break down, lose his sanity, and isolate himself from the world is just excruciating to watch. And in case you still found the episode even slightly tasteful, Plankton then has a seizure-inducing nightmare, filled with horror music and Plankton being burned alive by acid. This is what eventually leads him to try and kill himself. Was there any attempt at good taste in this episode? One Course Meal is truly the epitome of bad for SpongeBob. It's violent, it's cruel, it's disturbing, and downright malicious. I can easily say it remains the number one worst SpongeBob episode, But as much as it's easy to make fun of SpongeBob's bad moments, it remains one of the final creative, innovative cartoons Nickelodeon still airs. And after 16 years of episodes, any cartoon that tries to be creative is going to occasionally have a bad episode. And honestly, even if the new episodes aren't quite as good as the old, SpongeBob has managed to remain so solid over the years. So much so that even Nickelodeon can't find a reason to crush its creativity. It's always been miles above the Nickelodeon sitcoms, which populate most of the channel now. And I honestly don't mind SpongeBob sticking around because as long as SpongeBob is around, Nickelodeon can never quite forget the value of creative animation. Do you think I missed a particularly bad SpongeBob episode? If you think so, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.